Hey there, Next here. In this video, we're going to go over how to customize Lualine and Neovim to show the word count as well as the estimated read time. So I happen to be using LazyVim, but if you're not, still things are going to work about the same here. It's really going to be going over how to customize Lualine using Lua script. Now, quite a few months ago, I did switch over from Vim to Neovim. I still haven't made a video about that because that's going to be a really big video. But maybe one question that might be in your mind or you're on the fence, it's like, well, what if you want some custom functionality that doesn't exist and you need to create it? What's that workflow going to look like here? And I didn't really know Lua script prior to this. Sure, I have programming experience with Python, Ruby, shell scripting, etc. But yeah, I just wanted to see how hard would it actually be to do the things that I want. So yeah, this video is going to break down how I thought about the problem, some resources I looked at, and also going over the code to actually implement this specific solution here, getting the word count as well as the estimated read time, which by the way does dynamically get updated here based on a selection of text. You can see I'm selecting 3 words, so we have 3 words. Eventually if I select enough words here, you can see it jump over to 2 minutes as well. So with that said, yeah, problem number 1, or thing I wanted to solve first is well, where do I actually want to put the words and the estimated read time? And I figured, the bottom right sounded pretty good. So if we go to this Lualine file here, let me just comment this out so we take a look here at the default value of what things look like before any customizations here. You can see LazyVim is going to configure Lualine to have your local time here displayed as a clock. So I figured, okay, that seems like a good spot to replace that with the word count and estimated read time because, I already have my system clock displayed by my system. Kind of don't want it on the status bar for Vim. So then it's okay, let me go back to Lualine here and we'll take a look, bring things back how they were. Cool, there we go. And then take a look at the README file, and there we go. There's the modification there. Again, we're going to, of course, look at the source code. But if I go back to this file here real quick and we take a look at it, notice that the word count and the estimated read time isn't set now. And, another thing that I want to think about was well, maybe I only want to display that in text files or README files. Basically, if I'm writing a blog post or something like that, it is pretty handy to see these stats here. But if I'm working on a Python file or a shell script, I sort of kind of don't care how many words or, how long it's going to take to read. So, this idea of a condition, only applying it to certain file types, that was something I wanted to handle there. So yeah, at this point, it was okay, well, how do I even replace the thing in the bottom right? So I just started by going to LazyVim's documentation under plugins here for UI. There's the Lualine, and I went to its full spec, and I kind of just looked at all the different things here, and I started seeing some patterns here. Well, I just kind of scrolled down to here basically, and it was all right, well, this is the clock icon here displaying the local time. So it looks like, LazyVim is going to configure Lualine with these things like sections. So we have, Z here on the right, then we have Y, then we have all sorts of other different ones here, and it just goes on and on. These are different areas of the Lualine that you can configure. And again, this is how LazyVim has things set up here, but you can always go to Lualine's documentation to see all sorts of more low level details. But in my case here, it was yep, I'm going to have to go and replace this Lualine_Z with some functionality that is going to be custom that I'm going to have to write here. And I noticed just by skimming this file here that there's a couple of ways to output things. So it's well, you can have a function and this function is going to return a value, and this would be whatever text or whatever that you want to display, but you can also just supply a string as well. So apparently when you supply a string, this means that this functionality, this component already exists in Lualine and you can just reference it as a string. But if you want to supply your own functionality, then you define it as a function. And I'm okay, cool. Maybe I can go and take a look at some other examples here, a lot of inline functions, etc. So the first thing I did, right, was just going to this Lualine here, and I just replaced this with, an ABC 1, 2, 3. I just wanted to get some text out there on the status bar just to see what it looked like. And then after that, I started to be okay, cool. Well, I don't want to inline the functions because maybe there's, quite a bit of different logic here. Let me just define functions up here and then reference them down there. So, there's the word count function there, and then the reading time one as well. So here it's okay, just made some custom functionality here for each of these. Again, we're going to go into way more detail. Don't worry, just kind of giving high level details now. And the other thing was this condition, this idea that is always only going to apply to basically text files or markdown files. And, I kind of categorize that as is prose. So prose is basically, some type of writing, some type of, doesn't need to literally be a text document, but you can see here, this condition ultimately just needs to be a true or false value here. And this function that we defined up here is going to give us a true or false. So basically, if the buffer's file type is markdown or it happens to be a text, then we're going to get true here, and then it's going to apply. So you can see, again, it's not applied here, but if we jump over to the README file, it is applied there. And again, if you don't want that behavior, sure, then you can just remove the condition here. Or if you want to modify that behavior, then yeah, you can do whatever you like. By the way, all of this is up on my dot files. I'll leave a link to that one in the description. Don't feel like you need to pause the video and start typing stuff. So yeah. Okay, we solved some of the problems here. It's like we know how to customize different outputs here. We know that if we put a function here, we can put whatever we want, that's returned by that function within reason, and we can also have it applied to a specific condition. So now it's kind of like, well, now we need to get into, the gory details here. How do we actually calculate things like the word time or the word count or the reading time and things like that? So this came down to kind of just like Googling around for Lua script stuff, looking at some documentation, even using a little bit of ChatGPT, which turned out to be a little bit useful, which was quite nice. So yeah, let's start with maybe the word count or the reading time. So in this case, it doesn't really matter. I guess, sure, let's just go with actually reading time. Maybe it's a little bit more simple here in this case here. So it's like, how do you actually calculate the reading time? So it turns out that, most average folks will read about 200 words per minute. So what we really need to do here is basically get the word count, divide it by 200, and then we need to display like, something that we want to display. In this case here, it's going to be like 1 min or 13 min in this case. I didn't care about having the S at the end of the minutes there, so that made my life a little bit easier. But funny enough, like one problem was even just like, well, how do you even like concatenate two values with Lua script? And it turns out you can use ... here. So in this case, we're concatenating this value, which is going to be a number like 1 or 5 or whatever, converted to a string, by the way. That's something else I had to look up here. And then whatever, suffix here that we want, like a minute, something like this. And then we also just use ceil to round it down. But yeah, this get word count, this is a function that I extracted out here because I'm using this in 2 spots here for the actual word count as well as the reading time. Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to go into some of the details here. This thing is a local function. Again, by the way, I am not a Lua professional. I'm kind of just rambling based on the code I put together, based on just like Googling around and looking for things and actually seeing it work, looking at some other examples that was in LazyVim's code base. So here, it turns out that you can just make a local function, only available in this file or module, I guess, unless you exported it or something. But in this case here, get word count. What is it actually doing? Well, by default, it is going to return 0 words. And then it's going to use a built-in Vim function mode here to be like, okay, if you're in visual selection mode, then use this other Vim built-in function here to get the word count for that visual selection. Else, if we're not dealing with the visual selection, we know it's like the full document, in which case just get the .words instead. And then we just return that word count. So this word count is going to be something like 2,517, or if it's selected, it could be maybe 5 words. So that gets us that value that we want here, which is the word count. So then we can just do, 5 divided by 200, ceil it, convert it to a string, and then we get 1 minute. Or in this case here, let's scroll down a little bit. Maybe we get to something over 200 words. We can see that it's now 2 minutes. And, as you keep going up and up and up, as soon as they break 400, then it's going to be 3 minutes, etc. And, probably could have gone even further if I wanted to with this, maybe format some of this with a comma. Maybe there's like, 2 comma 517 words or whatever, but not every language uses commas for numbers like that. And honestly, not having a comma there isn't the end of the world, even though funny enough, I think I might have 1 or 2 blog posts that are even over 10,000 words or really close. But yeah, it's not too big of a deal here just to not have the comma there. So cool. We have the reading time here, super calculated out, done deal, not too crazy, just a function that returns a string saying the number of minutes. And then the word count here, again, we went over that logic here. Now let's go over the actual word count down here, which is going to display the actual word count with like either words or word or something like that. So then, yeah, we just have a little bit more logic here. This word count 1, this label is just going to be word. But if the word count happens to be greater than 1, which we get calculated here, right? This is going to be 0, 1, 5,000, 2,000, whatever happens to be. If it's greater than 1, we are just going to append S to our label here. So it says words. And then, yeah, we just return that, right? Word count concatenated with a space, concatenated with the label here. And of course, I could have made this like, its own little variable called label, and then maybe put this into a variable too, but it didn't really seem worth it. I mean, this is a one-liner and it's not really being used anywhere else, so I kept it simple there. But yeah, Lua script honestly is pretty approachable. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say I know this language very well, but basically just looking at examples using prior knowledge, sort of kind of is pretty approachable. Now, I did this modification, I don't know how many months ago. I don't remember exactly how long it took, but I remember thinking like, well, like, what is it going to be like? How long is this actually going to take? And I don't think it really took any longer than maybe like 2 or 3 hours, something like that. And again, of course, now it looks so easy after it's all broken down. But, I had to figure out like, well, how do you even find if you're in a visual selection mode with Vim, is this going to be like robust enough? And it hasn't failed yet. Maybe there's a better way to do it. But yeah, in this case here, it's like, well, how do I even like convert something to a string? Sure, then maybe that took a couple minutes to look up, but really not too bad at all. And yeah, hopefully this gives you some insight on just like what it's like to customize Lualine, working a tiny bit with Neovim, being able to modify some stuff from LazyVim as well, and kind of just like breaking down a problem to solve a very specific thing that you want. Again, you can use these patterns here to do whatever you'd like. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer all of them. If you like the video, please give a thumbs up. It really does help a lot. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And yes, don't worry, I will be making more Neovim videos for sure.